want to ask you though about the vulnerability of the aircraft carriers and overall the U.S. Navy, because the Iranians seems to have their missiles seems to go through everywhere in hitting these bases almost in all the countries of the region. However, the U.S. Navy though it seems to be, well, I'm not sure if it's been untouched. I haven't seen anything. Have the Iranians attempted, or is it simply uh, beyond the
Yeah,
reach?
I don't know. I've seen one video that claims to be from some Chinese tourists or something like that, and I don't remember if it was Haifa or Tel Aviv somewhere, where they claim to show this grainy video of a U.S. ship getting hit. Uh, I don't know if there's so many deep fakes out there. You can't take anything at face value anymore, even really good looking videos. So I don't know. Certainly haven't heard any reports on that. I had heard that there were some reports of U.S. casualties killed in action earlier on in the process, like in the early hours, and the Pentagon, I'm sorry, the Central Command, CENTCOM, said, no, there hasn't been any. Well, from some direct sources that some of my friends know, that they knew there were, but that's what they were saying. And then, of course, today they have confirmed that there were 3 killed, 5 seriously wounded, and a number of others less wounded. And my sources are saying even that number is not true. It's low. It's higher than that. So we can expect to see that coming out. So it's possible that there have been some, but then we haven't been reporting it so far. We're afraid of the news because unlike all these where there's 10,000 cell phone cameras every time there's anything happening in the city, that's not the case out to sea. No one would know unless it's reported. So maybe there has, maybe there hasn't. I don't know. That has been one thing that surprised me. I expected to see that, but whether it hasn't happened or whether we just don't know about it yet, I can't really say at this point.
Well, how would you assess though the developments going forward in the next days and weeks? Again, this is a war of attrition. Then that is, it should be assessed by the ability of each side to, I mean, cause pain to the other, and also the ability to absorb the pain, or
Yeah.
is this how you should understand the actions on both sides, or is the United
Yes.
States more looking just for, or, yeah, a quick fix?
Ultimately, it's a battle of wills. I mean, you can generally say that about every war, but this one even more so because we chose to try this on the cheap. We said, let's bring all this naval and air power in, but no boots on the ground because it's like a bugaboo in the United States. And there's many people, to include Senator, I think Senator Cotton, but Senator Cruz and Senator Lindsey Graham, they all repeatedly bragged about how there were no boots on the ground. Nobody was talking about that. President Trump said that because they know that that's something that American voters hate. So they thought, well, maybe we can win this on the cheap. And instead of like in 2003, when we had a lot of air and naval power and a credible ground force of hundreds of thousands of troops that when it was necessary rolled in on the ground. And so, if you're talking about President Trump telling the IRGC, the police forces, and the besieged and everybody else to put down your arms, well, that doesn't carry any weight if there's nobody there to make you do it. Just bombs falling, and unless you have an army that can come and compel it, like the Iraqis did. When we said the same thing to them, and now here comes the First Armored Division rolling up the street, that's going to have some teeth. But this one here, there is no armored division. There's nobody on the ground whatsoever. So there's no reason for them to capitulate. They just like, all we have to do is survive the onslaught. And they know how many weapons we have, or they have a pretty good idea. They know that we have been bled, deeply, maybe not dry, but been bled deeply by all the support we've given to Israel since October 2023. They know that we've been bled because of the 4 years of nonstop sending stuff to Ukraine. And it doesn't matter that Trump hasn't given it away. He sold it, and we've still given, our inventory has gone down and our production has gone out there. So nothing was replaced that was lost during the Biden administration. It's continued to dwindle. And now all of a sudden you need it. And they know that, look, they piled up all this stuff for years, for decades, because they've always foreseen this being a possibility. We have no idea how many missiles that they actually have, how many drones that they actually have, because they're underground, and we can't count those. We can't go in with satellites, but we can imagine that they have a lot. Senator Ted Cruz today said that his understanding is that, this is today, that Iran can produce right now, with all of these sanctions and everything else and all these fires, all these attacks we've made, still 100 missiles per month. So whatever was lost in the 12-day war has been replaced, and we don't even know how many they had before that. I've heard wildly different assessments, but whatever it is, it's a decent amount, and that's on top of the tens of thousands of drones that they have. So I think that they have just said it's going to be a test of political will. Our will is going to say, we're going to keep this going beyond your 2-week window, and we're going to start spreading it out for like 2 or 3 months after that, when you're going to be hurting. Because if we now don't have very many air defense missiles, and we start getting like the Ukraine side is, where they have an inadequate number of Patriots and the Irish T and all the other kinds of air defense they have, and all of a sudden Russia can come and flood the zone with more missiles than they have interceptors, the stuff is going to get through. Iran could be in that same, weirdly enough, position of Russia, to where we use all of our the bulk of our interceptors, like the rate we have right now anyway, and all of a sudden now then we can't knock that many down. And by the way, there was some pretty dramatic footage. I think we're going to show one of the scenes on our show this afternoon. Of an American, reportedly an American videographer on one of the, I think it was on Bahrain, where they had the camera up there and they could see an incoming missile, and then you saw a Patriot interceptor fire up to intercept it, and you can see, because the angles were just flawless, it missed. The Patriot missed, and the other missile came in and just hit very close to where the guy was on the ground. I mean, that's day one. That was the first day that you're seeing we're already missing. Now imagine if you don't even have enough of those. And so now that instead the missile comes in and there is no defender, there's not even one missile going up. And you can see that now then you can start putting more and more of these lower cost drones in the air, because you can't knock those down in quantity either. So I think that the Iranian side is calculating, we're just going to increase the pain on you until you can't survive anymore. Our strategy, on the other hand, is like, oh, snap. I thought this was going to be done in a few days, and in a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then they would capitulate. So it's, and that's still the hope. They're still saying we do have a couple of weeks of really high intensity strikes that we can have, and there's a lot of pain that we can bring on the Iranian side. So I'm sure that we're going to continue on, along with Israel, to try and bring as much pain as possible, hoping that they can get them to that point. But if we get beyond that, and the Iranian side is still viable, and our side is, now that we're down to our inventories of missiles, offensive and defense, are now in a smaller condition. It doesn't matter how powerful our Navy is, how many fighter jets we have, how many air Patriot missile batteries we have. None of that matters if you don't have the missiles. That's the key issue that too few people recognize. It's about the inventory of your offensive and defensive missiles. And it could be that Iran has more of them. It's certainly more to use here, without us making the rest of, I mean, unless we rape everything out of Indo-PACOM or everything else out of everywhere else in the world and bring them in here. And now then we're literally, empty-handed everywhere else, and that could be a real problem, but there'll be a temptation to do that. This could be a major, major problem for our side if it doesn't end within a couple of weeks.
So much for the pivot to Asia. This is this is the opposite of what Trump was going to
That's
do.
going to be the raping Asia to get what we need to fight here.
Yeah. Sorry, just a last very quick question though. You mentioned that the U.S. can, well, exhaust itself. The Iranians can put a lot of pain on the United States. But what do you think is the most vulnerable area though? Because if I was advising the Iranians, I would point out you have many pressure points you can push against the United States. You can hit the American assets of the region, that is all the military bases. You can hit the Gulf states, even the civilian targets, to make sure that these countries go through a lot of pain. Even oil refineries, well, whatever you want to go for. You can also go after the global economy, for example, shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, or shutting down some of the air traffic. You can also focus a lot on Israel, and as we speak, you have all these missiles raining over Jerusalem. So there's which area do you think is most likely to break first? Because
yeah. This will tell us really where the Iranian mindset is right now. My guess is, based on what we've seen so far, is that they made a statement with firing in Dubai and Bahrain and some of these other cities. I think that they're like, okay, message sent and received. I think that we've told you that. But now that I think, because quantity is an important thing, I think now they'll turn it to the more higher value targets that they have. And I think that is, for the United States, I think that pressure point is casualties. I think that they cause it because there's already been a lot of anger in the U.S. Social media space, even at some high levels, about the casualties that have started here. So I think that they'll prioritize anything that's going to be high casualty producing on the United States throughout the region, at all of our bases, and maybe they'll start going after the ships. I don't know. And then the same thing in Israel. I think that they'll go after casually producing capabilities. I think they're going after the military first, especially anything with the intelligence. They'd love to go after those. And I had seen some reports that they did go after some intel facilities inside of Jerusalem to try and cause some degradation of their ability to track anything that's going on inside of there. And of course, if they can go after missile launchers on the Israeli side or their aircraft, that would be a high value target. Same with the United States Air Force. If they could knock those out, if they could knock out the tankers, that's a big thing too, because that will limit our ability to even use the fighter jets that we have. But I think that depending on what we do would be what they do next. If we don't go after the Iranian oil infrastructure and their energy supplies and their refineries, et cetera. And I haven't seen any reports that we get that yet. Maybe we have, and I just didn't see it. But if we start going after that, especially at scale, and we can, it's a fixed target, it wouldn't be that hard, then I think you're going to see Iran also start to pivot, because I think that part of the signal also, I would imagine, what I would do when I see hit all of these civilian targets, I can say that's bad for you. And like, I think it was Qatar, there was, I think it was Qatar anyway, or may have been Dubai, where they hit a high profile hotel in the middle of the city for which tourists and other things. They hit an airport. But they're like, we could also hit something else that's important to you, and that is your oil infrastructure. We can hit your refineries. We can hit your their transfer stations at the ports, et cetera. We could cause profound damage that would take a long time to fix and come at much, much higher costs for the kingdoms themselves. But I don't think they'll do that unless we go after theirs. And so if we try to ramp this up to bring more pain on the Iranian side, then I think you can see an expansion. So you talk about the escalation ladder. I think the escalation ladder started on rung 4 or 5, but there are still rungs above it that it can go to. So there is some room left to escalate. And I hope we don't get there, but those are the things I'm worrying about.